Have you ever wanted to play a fantasy roguelike as Aladdin? How about the Pied Piper? No? Well, Geppetto then. Everyone's wanted to slide into those overalls one summer's eve. Ravenswatch received one of its largest updates in April with the fall of Avalon, and after a friend suggested we try it out, I'm surprised to say that this game is up there as being one of my favourite roguelikes. But is it really worth your time in its early access state, or should you wait for release? Let's take a look. Hey, quick editing note here. Just as I'm finalising this video, I've seen a dev update posted yesterday. The game is hitting 1.0 on August 1st. My thoughts and feelings on the game remain the same, so stay tuned. On release, there'll be a new final boss and an endgame. Back to it. Who would have thought a genre surrounding permadeath would have translated into the fairy tale fantasy art style so well? If you've never heard of the game or roguelikes in general, the short version is, you pick one fairy tale character from the list, jump into the world, fight through the days and nights to power up in preparation for the arrival of the nightmare, and repeat. With the game currently having 3 chapters, each with the main boss and a mini boss or 2 if you can find them, and 4 difficulty levels. That might sound like a small gameplay loop, but a successful run takes around an hour. Keeping it fresh is the classic roguelike loop of each run having subtle differences defining your build and playstyle, and Ravenswatch really stands above the rest with its fairly wide variety of characters. Thinking of recent roguelikes like Hades, I was impressed to see a roster of 8 unique characters already available, with space for more to come. To be fair to the comparison, Hades has included various weapon types, which in essence solves the same problem, by increasing replayability, but it's so much more distinct in Ravenswatch at a character level. These characters have personality, very different abilities from one another, and really lean into their playstyles. But having recently come from Hades 2, I was missing the overall story elements that those games provided. While Ravenswatch does have a story behind it, it's largely delivered by text within the main screen menus under each character. Leveling up the characters reveals more of this over time, but because it's so removed from the run themselves, I never really paid it much mind. But I don't necessarily hold that against Ravenswatch. In most roguelikes, I have no interest in the story. Hades, since I've mentioned it, is one of the rare cases where they blend the story into the game genre itself, but where Ravenswatch story does little for me, the character variety more than makes up for it. Each character is kitted out with their trait, basic attack, power move, special move, defense ability, a dash, which is common among all characters, and an ultimate ability. Geppetto, for example, my favourite of the bunch, has a completely unique styled combat revolving around his trait, which allows him to build puppets that can hold enemy attention and attack on their own. Based on the talents you then choose as you play, these puppets can be turned into beefy fighters in their own right, shooting lasers from their eyes, or poking enemies with their noses. Or they can be turned into timed explosives, shoved into the pack to explode and deal AoE damage. While Geppetto has the basic attack, it's rarely his focus. He's all about the puppetry, and as you'd expect, he makes occasional quips about Pinocchio, but he doesn't make an appearance. I did quite enjoy these. They aren't overdone, they're varied enough that in the 24 hours I have in Ravenswatch at the time I'm writing this, they hadn't begun to feel repetitious. On the opposite end of the hero spectrum is Beowulf, a melee fighter who uses his worm to buff his abilities. Beowulf's trait is simply that his companion will buff one of his abilities, giving it a secondary function. His defense, which can block damage, will then also heal him when buffed. His spin attack, when buffed, adds additional damage to the end of his attack string that ignites, and so on. I won't go through every character here, but they are all unique in their own right, with the Ice Queen being more of a mage or caster, alongside our mermaid pal, while characters like Scarlet act like a rogue dashing in and out of combat. But it's not just the characters themselves that are different from one another. As you progress towards each boss in the 3 maps, there is a day-night cycle that takes place which can impact how characters behave. Not every character is impacted by this transition, but Scarlet, or Little Red Riding Hood, turns from a rogue into a wolf at night, completely changing her abilities. Her dash attack becomes a strong bite, dealing significant damage, and her ability to slide into invisibility is replaced with a new defensive option. She becomes slower, but stronger at the same time. The Pied Piper's basic attack during the day are notes shot from his flute. At night, these attacks become less potent, but can then pass through enemies, vastly increasing his damage against mobs when positioned correctly. The world's day-night cycle also has an impact on how enemies behave in the world, leading to a greater sense of immersion, and it also prompts you to think more deeply about how to approach combat. But this did leave me feeling somewhat underwhelmed by the time I'd beaten the game's hardest difficulty. Some enemies will sleep at night, giving you the opportunity to sneak past them and potentially grab objectives without interruption, while others, like these pigs, will explode on death in the sunlight, but will die normally at night. There were times I thought about avoiding the pigs at night, in the hope that during the day I could quickly dispatch them faster, as their explosions damage one another. But because you never know what enemies will be ahead of you, if I reached a group of pigs in the night, it didn't really make much sense to come back later, as that's just wasting the limited time you have before the boss fight. My explosion plan, while faster, would only save me a bit of time I'd otherwise spend walking somewhere else. It's still neat to see the differences between day and night and knowing you may have an advantage or disadvantage, but I wish I could work it into my planning for the map. Which, by the way, the day-night cycle takes place a few times over 18 minutes in each level, with the boss fight automatically beginning at the end of the timer. This keeps the game at an excellent pace. I never felt like I was short of time. Well, until I was actually short of time, but I also knew I wouldn't be able to fully explore a map. You really only get maybe 60-70% of it done. Perhaps that can be streamlined, but you'd almost never be able to completely clear it. But it all feels achievable at the same time. The general enemy design in the world is fantastic. It's greatly varied, with many monsters having one or two basic attack chains. As you get further into the game, enemies begin to have wider sweeping abilities. They may lay mines, heal one another, and here we can see that Roadhog somehow snuck his way into the game. It all blends together wonderfully when you move to an objective and need to prioritize your damage while also dodging everything coming at you. The game's boss fights are equally as challenging. They're well telegraphed, like most enemies. I never felt like I couldn't dodge an ability, although there was the rare moment I dodged from one and wasn't able to escape another, or a very rare moment when a boss was off screen readying a move I couldn't see, which caught me off guard, but that was more of a learning moment that I needed to keep eyes on. When I took damage, I knew I positioned poorly, and it rarely felt unfair. Attacks are generally really well telegraphed, but there is a trial and error process which comes with the genre. If I had a complaint surrounding the combat, it's that certain status effects aren't always very clear in their design, and understanding what they do. The tooltips throw out words like vulnerable and intangible, or chilled and ignited, and while as a gamer, I have an idea of what this means in essence, early on I was slightly put off by the fact I wasn't 100% sure what vulnerable did. Did it remove the armor on some enemies for a period? Increase damage? How much damage does ignite do? And what does intangible involve? While playing Beowulf, I learned I could block attacks, but when trying this on a boss, I learned some attacks are unblockable. This information is available in the menus, but not while in-game, which over time is not an issue, but does make things challenging early on when you think you're getting the hang of it and you're thrown a curveball. Which brings me to the question, what do you do in the lead up to these fights? Most roguelikes give you some minimal options in how you progress to a boss, putting in front of you procedurally generated rooms to fight enemies with a reward tied to the end. This is how it is in Hades or FTL, another one of my all-time favourites. Completing a room lets you then choose between which room you want to go to next, with an idea of the upgrade to come. Ravenswatch has my favourite concept for this, which is a small open world map that I hope more developers look into. You spawn in with a vendor who can upgrade your talents, potentially give you additional copies of items you collect, or let you reroll for a price. Your shop is random, so it's never certain what you may get, but let me break down how you upgrade your character. Characters level up gaining traits. This is your normal roguelike stuff. Your character gets an option on level up between traits. You can reroll these with stars, which are a limited resource. As you level, you'll eventually receive your ultimate, but all your other abilities are available at level 1. And leveling your character outside of matches gives you a wider variety of options in later games. With your traits augmenting how these abilities behave over time, you slowly unfurl more and more playstyles, although most characters look to only have maybe 2 or 3, but I'm still fresh into that exploration. As you play, your character will also collect magical items of different rarities, from common to legendary or even cursed items. These provide you buffs to damage on certain abilities, extra ability charges, reduced shop prices, and so on, with legendary items having the strongest buffs like a heal when using your defense ability, or giving you resistance to damage, or even dash resets when you use any of your other skills. How you choose to spend your time before Nightmare arrives is up to you, and I love the freedom of this system. You can see nearby points of interest on your map, the area's side mission, and it's up to you from there. If you want to chase down magical items, you can. Focus on combat to level up, collect dream shards to spend at the vendor, or complete the side mission to collect legendary items. I appreciate that Ravenswatch keeps this open to the player with varying points of interest that provide the opportunity to seek out what you want, and adds a fun ticking clock mechanic. You can find health pools that heal you while increasing your max HP, Raven's Eyes that will reveal the local area kind of like an Assassin's Creed game, and varying objectives from timed fights, battles that will reduce the boss's overall HP, and more. The shop options I found also encouraged me to play in conjunction with what items I found. I was always excited to find the shop discount item early, and if the vendor had the option to duplicate it, I could grab 3 of these almost instantly. But you're always posed with the question, can you get to where you want before the timer runs out? Or should you settle for a little more XP or some small nodes nearby? No 2 runs feel the same with this diverse system, and you have to think carefully about how to manage your time and how you can best move through the map. This works really well in single player, where the timer pauses when you're in your map, in the shop, or when choosing your talent upgrades. I wish this pause option was an option in co-op sessions if everyone chooses to upgrade together or buy together. And yes, the game is co-op. When playing co-op, both parties get items from objectives independently. They level up on their own, they have their own shops, so you don't have to fight over resources, keeping you focused on the task at hand. Playing together makes enemies somewhat tankier, but also gives you opportunities for complementary play, as some characters have abilities that can aid one another. In one instance, I was playing as the Pied Piper, and chose an ability upgrade that makes his special move chill enemies inside it, while my friend was playing as the Snow Queen, who does more damage with certain abilities to those who are chilled. The game isn't focused on these synergies, which is a bit of a missed opportunity, but it also ensures that solo play is viable with every character in the roster, with none requiring the aid of another. A run will end when you either die or beat all the bosses, but your first death isn't the end. Ravenswatch works on a life system, which is shared between players, with higher difficulties giving you less lives, denoted by the feathers by your life bar. When a player is downed solo, they immediately use the feather to get back up. If you're co-op, your friends have a short period to get you up, or the player can choose to use a feather. Being limited use, it's always worth trying to grab your friends, but at times, if too many enemies are present, you won't be able to. And getting more lives isn't simple. On each map, you can find the objective shown as a feather, which lets you buy 1 additional life, but it takes 100 gold per player. Valuable if you're on your last legs, and again, an interesting choice, rather than one you stumble into. Do you go looking for the feather so you can have an extra life for the boss? Or do you just take the easy loot nearby? Is a small power spike or 2 more valuable than an extra life when finding that extra life could take 5 minutes? And as I briefly touched on, when you do die, there is some out of match progression. Each character currently has 8 levels to them, but given we're in early access, I believe this will be expanding with many parts of the menu system, showing that more will come in later updates. Leveling your characters unlocks a wider variety of traits to find in future runs, and currently, each character has an alternate ultimate ability to try out. I quite like this. It encourages you to play different characters. I felt underwhelmed with the Pied Piper's first ultimate, which makes you run around like a machine gun. I much preferred commanding a rave of rats, but that did leave me immobile. Ravenswatch is currently in such a highly replayable state, I would recommend it, highly, to anyone with a keen interest in roguelikes. I could see myself coming back to this game over the months and years to come. It's got a great couch co-op feel to it. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it is a ton of fun with friends. If you're more likely going to play this once, it may be worth holding off for a full release, which should be sometime in 2024. The devs state on their Steam page that they intended for the game to have 3 chapters, which are now all currently available. But there are more traits, items, and likely heroes to come. For me, I can't wait to see what future patches may bring, and jump back in as they add more, but maybe you want to hold off. What do you think of Ravenswatch? I've been pleasantly surprised by this one. It's a real breath of fresh air in a genre I was beginning to find quite stale. The open world aspect keeps me more immersed and locked in during my playthrough than the constant stopping and starting of most roguelikes as you move between rooms or instances. That ticking clock, knowing every second counts, can really let you optimize runs outside of knowing what traits or items are essential to one another. The open world design really requires you to think on your feet constantly and make decisions quickly rather than slowing the pace down between action moments. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Have you tried this out, or do you like what you see? I'm loving the indie scene this year. While Ravenswatch did come out in early access in 2023, it's really hit its stride with this update, and it's absolutely a hidden gem at the moment. I hope this game gets more attention and really blows up. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Please do like and subscribe if you want to see more. It's honestly the best way to help me out, and I'll catch you down in the comments. Cheers.